Hey guys, thanks for joining. Give me a minute here. We'll get started. All right. Well, let's go ahead. Just make sure I am unmuted. I am good. Okay. Okay. So today we're going to take a little bit deeper dive into condominiums. It must be this time of year, that time of year, because I actually did this presentation in January of last year. And so the reason I'm doing it again is because in the past week or so, I've had more than a couple of agents enter into condominium transactions that weren't quite sure how to fill out the contracts and various things. So we're going to review that today. Before I get going, speaking of contracts, I actually have added some more. Onto our website, one of which is going to be the condo contract when we get done. Hang on. So if you go to the contracts tab on our website, the ones that I've added that are already filled out for you are the addendum for lead-based paint. And I've actually done a description and explanation on what that document is for, how to fill it out, and some things to consider, because it is a two-part document. One's filled out by the buyer, one's filled out by the seller. And then lastly, a contingency offer. So there is an addendum for sale of other property by buyer that you'll have to fill out if your client wants to make an offer based on a contingency. So that's there as well. But so that being said, let's go into the condominium deal. And before I do that, I wanted to just kind of review a couple of things. So I actually found this on a Facebook group this morning, and the Facebook group's name is Share Your Listing. And this is just kind of in the DFW area. I'm sure every city has something similar. So my question to you is, and you'll have to mute or unmute to answer the question, based on what you see here, is what this agent is doing a violation or not? Who wants to hazard a guess? She's advertising an off-market property, gorgeous modern 3-story K Hovanian home built in 2020. So based on that, based on the pictures, is she in violation of something?
Is she a realtor?
She is a realtor.
Well, I don't know. How do you do it off market if you're a realtor?
Exactly. Exactly. So the MLS clear cooperation rules are not just for the state of Texas. They were implemented by NAR. So to your point, was that Sarah Sue that said that?
It was Becky.
Becky, okay. She is on, so is this considered advertising? It's on a Facebook page.
Definitely.
It is, correct. So if that weren't bad enough, the picture on the right shows her sign in the yard. So to your point, Becky, realtors can't do off-market listings or what they call pocket listings. Now, is there a spot in the MLS, or I'm sorry, the listing agreement that says owner does not want agent to put it on the MLS? Yes, there is. In fact, she mentions this if you click more, see more. And so if a client requests that the listing not go on the MLS and you can't advertise it here, how are you supposed to sell the home? And that's somewhat of a rhetorical question because it becomes very, very difficult. So the instances where you would not put it on the MLS might be the client wants to sell it to a family member or a neighbor or some other known buyer where listing it in the MLS is not required. The only other recourse this person has, if that client said, I don't want it listed on the MLS, is to try and sell it within their brokerage or start getting on the phone and asking people if they want to buy a home. Otherwise, the infraction here is the advertising part. It's not that it's not listed on the MLS, it's that she's blatantly advertising this to the general, well, to realtors. Can't do that, okay? It's still up as of about 10 minutes ago, and no one's commented. And I looked up her number and she has been doing this a while. So this kind of is under the heading for me of you kind of should have known better. But when I come across these just blatant infractions, I like to kind of bring it to everyone's attention so that we can kind of see, feel it, touch it, and get a sense of what people are doing out there. So the most common infraction here is that you put a yard sign in the yard. You're going to list it in the MLS, but it's not there yet. But she has obviously gone way beyond that. So just as a refresher, put a sign in the yard, but you got 24 hours to put it into the MLS in some kind of status, be it coming soon, be it active. Okay.
Brad, I have a question about that. So similarly, I've been noticing a particular realtor who lists out here in the East Dallas area that will put it on MLS, but then the very first line in the description is seller has accepted a tentative offer, and yet it remains active. And so I don't know, what's the rule about that?
So in my mind, the only way that could happen is if that listing was in a coming soon status. And remember, you can't show it and you can't accept offers if it's in coming soon. So my guess is that it may have been in coming soon. They took an offer, but they really couldn't do anything with it until it's legally active. And so they turn it active, and that's where that description might come in. I'm just guessing that's what happened.
Okay, and I've noticed it on multiple ones by the same realtor. So that just seemed kind of weird to me. It's like they're saying there's an offer on it, but there's really not an offer on it because they're leaving it as active. So I just couldn't figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, that just screams unethical, because it's the same principle of that same agent saying they have multiple offers when they don't. Submit your highest and best by X date. We have multiple offers. That you're not. I mean, you can't do that if that's not a factual statement. All right.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep, you bet. All right. So in the spirit of prospecting and trying to stay in touch with clients and so forth, one of our agents has put together what we call a pop by gift, which is you pop by to the prospects, or in this case, her previous clients' home or place of business, and you leave them something as a reminder. And so in her case, it was, these are all going out to prior clients. So you guys know as well as I do that realtors typically don't do as good a job as they could in following up with clients once a transaction has come and gone. So my philosophy is that every transaction should net you at least a couple of referrals in the first year. And then you really should be thought of as the only person they think of when someone wants the name of a realtor. So in order to do that, you have to stay top of mind. So she put together a little kind of Valentine's Day theme pop by gift that she's going to leave with her past clients. So I just thought that was cute. Just wanted to show you kind of what that product looked like. Let's see. And Christy is not on, so that was Christy. So I just wanted to see if she was on. She could add more commentary if she wanted to. But anyway, each month has at least one of these occasions. March is St. Patrick's Day. April would be Easter, Passover, just spring in general. So, I mean, there's really no shortage of ideas for this type of thing. All right. So let's launch into the condominium process. So some things to consider when you are entering into a condo transaction. So you need to think about what the owner really owns in a condominium. And then there are FHA loan guidelines for the purchase of a condo. If it's a conventional loan, then there are no issues. But FHA there are, and I'm going to go into those in a moment. What are the HOA costs and restrictions? So whenever I mention the phrase HOA, I'm really talking about what they refer to as the condo association. Okay, so a subdivision of single family homes may or may not have an HOA, but a condominium complex will always have a condo board or a condo association. Okay. A condo unit is within a larger building, whereas a townhome is not necessarily. Owner will usually own the land a townhome sits on. That is not the case for a condo. Okay, so how does ownership work with a condominium? So when you think of a condominium complex, in your mind's eye, think of an apartment style complex on steroids, okay? It is ownership of that particular unit. So each owner is really deeded ownership into the airspace of the unit. The owner does not own the ceiling, walls, or floors necessarily, right? And then the owner is then partial owner in the common areas to the complex, such as the pool, maybe laundry facilities, green belts, exercise facilities, community rooms. All right, there's fractional ownership that each owner of a unit has, and you're paying for that each month. And then each owner pays an HOA to maintain the upkeep of the grounds and commonly owned areas. Okay, so there is a company that the condo board will sell out to maintain the grounds and just make sure that all those common areas are kept up. All right. Your monthly condo fees typically will include hazard insurance. So that means that when you think of a single family home, you're spending thousands of dollars in case what? The foundation becomes compromised. There's a fire, there's a flood, the roof sustains hail damage. All those things are covered by homeowners insurance. That's not the case with a condo. So the building itself, if there's a hailstorm, you're not calling the insurance company to replace the roof because you share that roof with other units in the building. So a condominium complex will typically cover that huge, umbrella of hazard insurance. I'm going to go into kind of what that looks like in a second. Okay, but it is always a good idea to get insurance for the contents of the condo itself. No, not just furniture and belongings, but in case a pipe does break and a countertop or something sustains damage, something that they're not responsible for, you want to make sure that you have coverage for that. All right, and then owners are typically responsible for plumbing, electrical, and HVAC most of the time. Okay, so if there's a leaky faucet, you're paying for that. Same goes for your HVAC unit. All right, so the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, or the CCRs, govern all use of that unit. So it is not unlike the HOA covenants for a single family home. So they are going to cover things like, can you barbecue on your balcony? Can you hang things on your balcony? Can you make any kind of changes to your door or anything with regards to what might be considered common areas? Okay, so let's talk about the difference between a couple of these things. So a condo and a townhome. So a condo is going to be very much like apartment living. It's going to be multiple units within a larger building. A town and won't typically have an upstairs, downstairs. Townhome typically does have multiple levels and are usually 2 or 4 to a building. And in some cases, as I said earlier, you can own the land underneath your particular unit. This depends on how it's configured. Okay, condo and an apartment. From a lifestyle perspective, there isn't a whole lot of difference. You may be sharing a wall, ceiling, or floor with someone in a condo, just like you would with an apartment. The difference is that in a condo, you own that unit. Okay, you are deeded ownership. And then a condo and a single family home, I think the differences are obvious. A single family home is detached. It's on land that you own. You have to upkeep. That's the major difference. You got to mow your lawn, got to keep up appearances. And it's still a deeded transaction, but it is a separate structure. So let's talk about the lending considerations for a condominium complex. So the complex may not be FHA approved. So when you are embarking on the task of showing people condos, similar to when we show people single family homes, we're always asking them, what? Have you been pre-qualified? Okay, same thing applies here, but there's an added question. Is the complex you're going to see FHA approved? And so I'm going to show you a link in a second that kind of speaks to this. So secondly, there are usually restrictions on how many units can be owner occupied or can be investor owned and or can be used for commercial purposes. Let's kind of talk about that for a second. The purpose of the majority of housing is to have it your primary residence. Condo is no different. But because they are less expensive, they are good targets for investors. And the condo complex typically has restrictions as to what percentage of their units can be investor owned. All right, and if they've reached that limit and your client wants to be an investor in that condo, they're not going to be able to. All right, and then lastly, used for commercial purposes. So some of these complexes have pretty stringent rules regarding what you can do with that unit. And so is it common for people to sell stuff on Amazon as their primary business? Absolutely. If you use this address as that place of business, that may be a no-no. Okay, so depending on what that client is going to do with regards to the business aspect, that needs to be clarified. And that has never been more important in today's environment where a lot of people are working from home. Okay, so I mentioned earlier about the FHA approval. So FHA has a unique hand in condominium complexes. And for a client to be able to get an FHA loan, the complex has to be approved for that possibility. So this is a link that you can go to look up condominium complex to see if it's been approved. So let's just do that. So I happen to know, I did this search earlier, there's an old, really old condominium complex in a town near here that I'm just familiar with. And it's called the Las Brisas Condominium Complex. So I am going to, let's choose Texas. And this is what comes up. So this is it. It's in Dallas County, 87 buildings, 301 units, manufactured housing, no. FHA concentration, 29.23% of occupants there have an FHA loan. So, I mean, by that, you know it's approved, but they have a status that says it's approved. Okay, so I'm going to put this link on our web page so that you all have access to it under the buyer seller leases tab. But if you're ever in doubt of whether or not a complex is approved for an FHA loan, this is the link to go. So red flag should go up the minute your client says, I'm not getting a conventional loan for this, I'm getting an FHA loan for it. Okay, you have to find out if it's approved. Okay. Okay, so let's go into the contract portion for a condominium. So I actually have one popped up here. So this happens to be residential condominium contract for resale, which means it's not a brand new complex. It is track form 30-15. And for the most part, it behaves a lot like the 1-4. But there are some things that we have to be aware of. Okay, so obviously this section is more robust. There are spaces for the actual unit, the actual building, and just a much deeper dive with regards to what that person is going to actually occupy. Okay, so I've kind of highlighted the finer points of the contract here. So when you get down to paragraph B on the declaration is all the bylaws. Okay, so imagine it's similar to when you have an HOA, stack of documents that tell you what you can do, what the HOA governs and what they don't with a single family home. It's the exact same thing, but they're very, very important. So you can check box B1 where it says buyer has received a copy of the documents. So this would be before this contract is even signed or executed. Okay, so how would this even happen? If these are already on the document section of the listing. Okay, so school your clients, if those exist, before they even see it, before they even sign a contract, they need to read them and make sure they're comfortable. Okay. Now, it then says, buyer has not received a copy of the documents. Seller at seller's expense shall deliver the documents to buyer within X amount of days. I'd give them 7. after the effective date of the contract. Buyer may cancel the contract before the 6th day after the buyer receives the documents by hand delivering or mailing written notice of cancellation to the seller by certified U.S. mail, return receipt requested. If buyer cancels the contract pursuant to this paragraph, the contract will terminate and they get their earnest money back. So this is the same spirit of an HOA with a single family home. Seller hasn't given them the CCRs. They get the CCRs. They don't like something in there and they want to back out. Okay, they've got 6 days to do that. All right, that is baked into the contract. So these are the only 2 options when it comes to the covenants and restrictions. All right, let's go down to the resale certificate. So like an HOA, there is a resale certificate. And so it says, resale certificate from the Condo Owners Association is called the certificate. Certificate must be a form promulgated by TREC or required by parties. Certificate must have been prepared at seller's expense, no more than 3 months before the date it is delivered to the buyer, and must contain at a minimum the information required under section 82.157 of Texas Property Code. So we're going to look at that in a second. So again, options are buyer has received it or buyer has not received it. I would also give them 7 days to get that to you. And similarly, it says certificate to buyer within 7 days after the effective date of the contract. Buyer may cancel the contract before the 6th day after the date the buyer receives the certificate, and they get their earnest money back. Okay. Now, so there are 2 important critical deal breakers that your buyer has to get in order to move forward. One is the declaration, the other is the resale certificate. And we're going to go into why that's important in a second. So condominiums sometimes have a waiting list or a first right of refusal to sell a unit that becomes vacant or come on the market to other people within the condominium complex. And that's what paragraph D speaks to. So you'll notice that it refers to the documents. These are the CCRs. If the documents reveal that this property or the complex is subject to a right of refusal under which the association or a member of the association may purchase the property, the effective date shall be amended to the date that the buyer receives a copy of the association's certification that either a seller has complied with the requirements under the right of refusal, and 2, all persons who may exercise the right of refusal have not exercised or have waived the right to buy the property. I'll explain that in a second. If the buyer does not receive the association certification within X amount of days after the effective date, or if the right of refusal is exercised, the contract shall terminate, earnest money goes back to the buyer. So I would give them between 7 to 14 days based on a conversation you have with the condo association. So what this means is that if this clause does exist, then the association has to go back to whoever has a right to buy the property and say, do you want it or you don't want it? Okay. So once they've completed that process, they have to give you notification that that's been done, so that you can move forward. Now, the reason why in the first bit it says the effective date will be amended is because that takes time. Okay, so your closing may be affected by a complex that has this in it. Okay, this is not really common, but it could exist, and if it does, it comes up in the CCRs. Okay, so here's what is in the resale certificate. So similar to an HOA's resale certificate, this is a declaration of the financial health of the condo association. And so as you can see, it includes lots of different things in here, not the least of which is how much your buyer is going to pay in fees and what it's going for, what it's going towards. Okay, so it covers things like, what insurance policy is in place, what does the insurance policy cover, how much of the monthly fees, what do they cover, and typically it's water, trash, sewer, sometimes electricity, but usually not. But this certificate is going to spell that out. It's going to also spell out capital reserves. Is there any amount of money set aside for acts of God? Hailstorm comes through. Is the condominium complex going to do capital improvements? Are they going to, and this is very common, are they going to resurface the driveway? Are they going to restripe the parking lot? Are they going to do any additional landscaping? And there are typically, there's language in there that says, we're going to charge you if it's within 10% more or less of the actual bid. So that monthly payment could change. Right, but this
right. I have a question. So if I'm representing the buyer, this condominium resale certificate will come from the seller's agent?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And then one of the last pages is speaks to the association fees resulting from the transfer of the unit described above. So similar to an HOA, there are transfer fees. This would outline what it is. And then in paragraph P as in Paul, they have to attach these various things: the operating budget, the insurance summary, balance sheet. Okay, so this is very much a financial transaction that is governed by a separate board, that when that buyer moves in, they're going to have to adhere to all those restrictions. So you can kind of see why it's important for the buyer to fully understand what their fees are, what they're going for, and what they're going to be on the hook for moving forward. Okay, and so to Kim's point, that is given by the seller. And a good listing agent will have them in the document section on the MLS listing. So just some miscellaneous things to review. The CCR's resale certificate can really make or break a deal based on what's in them. Okay, so don't assume that this is just busy work. You're just going to give this to the client and trust that they read it. I mean, I would go over it with them. That's your job. If they have any questions, they can certainly reach out to the condo board, but make sure you know when the 6th day is, because that's going to be when they can get out based on the CCRs and the resale certificate. Okay, so a condo in that kind of lifestyle appeals to someone who wants no upkeep responsibility and who wants, kind of communal living with a social component to it. Apartment renters come and go, but typically condo owners, they own that unit. So the longevity of those folks are longer, and there's more of a pride of ownership there. So it's the no maintenance aspect, I find, that really is appealing to someone wanting to purchase a condo, that and price. Let's talk about that. So condos typically do not appreciate in value at the same rate as a single family residence. Okay, so if someone is hoping to capitalize on this huge appreciation of property values in Texas, but because condos are cheaper, they're going to do that and hope that they're going to resell this thing in 2 years and make a fortune. That's just not going to happen. They just don't appreciate at the same rate. All right. Your monthly fees will usually always go up. Okay, sometimes a little, sometimes a lot. The older the complex, the more they're going to go up. So just kind of keep that in mind. It's a less stable payment than a single family residence. Okay. And then repairs can sometimes be tricky to do, especially if it's in an older building where things aren't separately metered. I've had this happen where I owned a condo unit in the early 2000s and for investment purposes. And our tenant calls me and there's some leaky faucet or leaky toilet or something that had to do with water that needed to be repaired. And come to find out, I could not shut the water off just to her unit without turning the water supply off to everyone else in the building. And I had to give those folks notice as to when I was going to do that. And I couldn't do it. I had to have someone in the condo association, the maintenance person, do it. So in some of these older buildings, that could happen. So just FYI, whether your client is going to live in it or use it as a rental property, something to be mindful of. Okay. So other than that, it's really those two documents that are most relevant to the condo transaction. You don't necessarily need to do an HOA addendum because the only good that does is that if it's an HOA in a subdivision, the reason you do it is to have an out with regards to what the CCRs say. Well, that's already baked into the condo contract anyway, so you don't necessarily need to do that. I mean, I would ask the other realtor or the condo association, but you probably don't need to do that because all of the key points are already included in the condo contract. Okay. So that's kind of it on condos. They're not really too terribly complicated, but there are two major pieces of information that your client needs to be aware of. I would first look at the listing documents in the listing and see if any of them are there, because that will make your job a lot easier. It might be the difference between going to see it and not. So, and then the second thing to be aware of, if they're going for an FHA loan. All right, you're going to need to verify whether or not it is an approved complex. All right, so any questions on the condo process? Now, there aren't many of these around so much anymore, but all right, well, good deal. Well, anything else to share this week? Because that was kind of it.
Yes, I want to share.
Okay.
Who first?
Go ahead, Sarah Sue.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to share something that I thought was kind of neat. I had somebody from Phoenix. I'm in El Paso. Had somebody from Phoenix call me and asked me if I knew any realtors. They had a family member that was going to buy a property. So I immediately called Brad, and Brad recommended somebody. So I got in touch with him. He agreed that he would do the referral, pay the referral fee. So the next day he showed the property and we were in contract. I thought that was neat because it doesn't often happen that way.
Yeah, it went quick, didn't it?
It did, yes. And it was a very, everybody's happy. That's kind
awesome.
of too. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. And just to let you all know how I kind of found that person, I just went on Zillow and did find an agent and kind of looked through some various profiles and, read the about me section and looked for certifications and chose, I think, 2 or 3 because, realtors, sometimes they don't answer their phone. So, but obviously, you know how the story ended, but it worked out well. So just FYI, I mean, I didn't necessarily know anybody personally in Phoenix, but that's why it's important for y'all to create your own profile on Zillow, add your picture. I didn't choose anybody that didn't have a picture, and fill it out as completely as you can, because I think this happens every day. And a lot of people are moving to Texas. So the more visible you can be, the more apt you are to get a referral. So good, thanks for sharing. Anybody else? All right, well, just as a heads up, I have an outside inspection company that does CE classes that is offered to do some CE for us. I think it's $10, but you get credit for an hour as an elective. And that is going to happen not next week, but the week after. Don't worry about remembering the date. I'm going to send it out. But the topic is inspections for new construction. So he's got about 6 or 8 of these that he does, all for credit. And he sent me the list of what the choices were, and I figured that was the most timely. And he said, yeah, that's been a popular one lately. So, so I'm going to have him on in 2 weeks. I'll send out a reminder and a way for you to pay for that. But I just want to give you all a heads up. All right, good deal. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate you joining me today, and you have a good rest of the week. Enjoy this warm weather while it lasts, and we'll see you all next Thursday. Take care, guys.